Welcome to The Buck Stops Here, the official audio program of NotInHallOfFame.com, and I'm your host, Kurt Buckner, The Buck, the owner and the operator of NotInHallOfFame.com and the sister sites, the Fictitious Athlete Hall of Fame and the Fictitious Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Vinny Lospinuso, our resident Football Hall of Fame expert, reached out to me over Twitter, and he wanted to sort of have a discussion. And it's a little bit of an awkward one, because it's going to be two white guys talking about African Americans who got looked over by the Pro Football Hall of Fame and their historical context and what they brought to the sport and to football, and not just to their race, but to humanity in general. I went also to Curt Flood, who I think is probably one of the biggest Baseball Hall of Fame snubs, not necessarily for what he accomplished on the field, but for what he did off of it. So I hope you'll just sort of indulge, again, two white guys discussing black snubs in the Halls of Fame. Thanks so much for listening. Vinny, how are things in Long Island?
We are in the middle of the second week now of the George Floyd protest. It currently not much on Long Island, though Merrick, Plainview, and some other places had some protests here and there. There was rumors that we were going to have protests in my own personal town, but there was lots of police around there, but unfortunately that didn't happen. Can't say the same thing for other places like, of course, Minneapolis, but also Los Angeles. There's like 10,000 people outside currently. There's also stuff that happened in Boston. There is also stuff that happened in St. Louis and just in Chicago, just everywhere around the country. And, better part, the entire world is reacting to the murder of George Floyd, which
they should be.
Is just... Yeah, they should. I mean, it was a horrible death, and we as a country, not trying to get political, but we as a country really need to show better accountability for officers, just law enforcement, that abuse their power and kill unarmed African Americans. It's a very disproportionate amount of this than white, Asians, or any other races. It's a very big problem, and I'm happy that this is happening, though I'm against the looting, and I'm against excessive police brutality that's going on. So either side, I'm not in favor of that. I'm not in favor of that. There's goods on both sides of the aisle, and there's also some small but very noticeable bad.
Well, all we can really hope for is that just everyone stay safe. Protesters stay safe. With you in spirits. Barbados, we just had our first minor protest, actually going out at the U.S. Embassy, but we had to keep it. Just a small protest marching towards the U.S. Embassy here in Barbados. Yeah. Admittedly, and I've said this to you off air, I'm much more comfortable living here right now than I would be if we were living in the United States or even back in Canada, for that matter. My hometown of Toronto, I don't know if you've noticed, there was this one. Did you see in Toronto there was this one idiot who showed up and he painted his entire face and body?
I saw that. I saw that, actually. And,
embarrassed to be a Canadian when I saw that.
It's definitely blackface. Or was that black body? Or was that black body?
Well, I guess so. Either way, it was clear. It was clear idiocy, and he got lucky. He got lucky. If he would have done that in a lot of other cities in the States, he would have got the snot pounded out of him, and he's lucky that he didn't.
Very fortunate.
Of course, we had a prime minister that once did that. Which is sad.
He's done that. He's done that on several occasions. But according to him, he's just great at costumes. He's just so passionate about costumes.
Yeah, I could go on and on about Trudeau. I won't today. You reached out to me. You wanted to talk about because you and I talk about the Hall of Fame all the time. And I'm so happy to have met someone who is as passionate about halls as I am. And I'm sorry.
Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah. So you reached out because you wanted to talk about some of the things, and this is some of the political talk that we did is actually kind of related, because you have felt, and you said this long before the protests, that there have been a few African-American pioneers in football especially that should be honored. And he said, let's just talk about that in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So I'm opening the floor to you. I know that I already know a few people that you're going to be talking about. One you sent me a paper on that you wrote at Hofstra. Mm-hmm. Do you want to open with that?
Yeah. Yes, I'm going to start with him. Now, in case people already know, my most wanted guy, now that Duke Slater's in, outside of Laverne Dilwig, is William Heffelfinger, the first ever professional football player. Mm-hmm. However, he was not black. Need to make that he was white, just like everyone else that was playing. However, for the first ever African American black professional football player, it was Charles Wallace, a.k.a. the Black Cyclone, who was a halfback that played for the Shelby Blues back in 1902. Yes, 1902. He played that long ago. So this is someone that played over 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Predates the NFL. Yep.
Yes. So we're having – it's not the NFL Hall of Fame, guys. It's the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It's in the name. It says Pro Football Hall of Fame. And we're talking about professional football. He fits the bill. He fits the bill. And another reason why this is also pretty significant is because when he was in high school and in college, he was also the captain of his team. So so this guy was so good in an era where very little opportunities were for African Americans to play organized sports. But this guy, Charles Wallace, a legend in the state of Ohio, was able to do that for both college and high school, and was even able to do that for the professional ranks. In fact, when he was in there, he met a guy that you probably have heard of, Branch Rickey. Why, yes, that Branch Rickey, mm-hmm. the same one, the legendary executive and general manager for the St. Louis Cardinals and the Brooklyn Dodgers. In fact, his experience with Wallace is the reason why Jackie Robinson was signed in the first place. So we would not have a Jackie Robinson if there was no Charles Wallace.
What college did he go? What college did he go to, Vinny?
He went to Worcester.
Worcester, okay.
He went to Worcester. That's where he went. Charles Wallace is a major icon in the state of Ohio, which, by the way, yes, it is where Canton is from, folks. Wallace was also the first ever African-American professional catcher to play in the Negro Leagues. He was the first ever catcher. So it's also a guy that could fit for baseball. Huh?
No, I didn't know that. Because I remember when you sent me that paper, I didn't remember that he was also a baseball player, too.
Yeah. And he's had several fields named after him. He's in a few halls, too. He's in the College Rooster Hall of Fame. And on February 3rd, every February 3rd is the state has a holiday, his own day named after him, called Charles Wallace Day. February 3rd was the day he was born in 1879, legislated by then Governor John Kasich. And you're having a guy who was a literal legend in the state. And with everything going on right now, you'd be an absolute fool to say that he's not worthy of the hall, because everything I just laid out says he is.
Now, one of the things that you and I have talked about, because we're both very critical of the Basketball Hall of Fame, the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame, but they do one thing that you and I both really like, which is the Early African American Pioneers Committee. This should be something that we could look at for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Hall has their own page on their website called for African American Pioneers. That's fine and all, but people don't care about that. People just care about one thing: having a bust, a ring, and a gold jacket. That is all that matters to people, and also the voters. The fact that the Hall itself has a website, on their own website, have a page dedicated to this, and you don't bother to look it up and just say, "Oh, Charles Wallace, he's right there." that never crosses your mind? Why? Like seriously, do you care about individuals or you care about yourself? Because we live in an age in which listening to the public is crucial now more than ever. And with everything going on right now, you see basketball and hell, even baseball and hockey has done it. And you still haven't done it yet?
Well, hockey doesn't really have like an African American pioneer. So they acknowledged the first ever black hockey player in Willie O'Ree.
Yeah,
but just to be clear though, it's not like they've got a set committee for that.
No, but even then, when hockey, the whitest sport of the Big Four, added their first ever player before the football one has, there's an issue.
Yeah, no, I can see how you're looking at it that way. Remind me, before we're done, there's like one person that I want to talk about in a different sport. And I know you're very, very passionate about this one. Who are you most passionate about after Mr. Wallace?
After Paulette, he's usually the biggest one, but afterwards, you have these other. I remember Patrick Claybon saying that he wants every single guy that was African American from the 20s and the 30s to be inducted. But then after Wallace, you didn't really have really much. You had Doc Baker and Charlie Smith, but the other one I want to mention is Henry Mcdonald. He was a pretty notable name during it. He was also considered a motorcycle McDonald because he was the fastest one. So I'd be down with that. But the one that I'm passionate about after Falls, in terms of my second most passionate one, it's got to be Tank Younger. It has to be Tank Younger. He is easily after Paul's real name. Tank was his nickname. What did you say?
No, I was just saying major name. So, yeah, tell everyone more about Mr. Younger.
Younger, now I'm going to mention this a little bit later. The Rams, Eddie Codel, who was pretty high on my list in terms of contributors, he knew, he was the one that had the inkling of saying, I'm going to sign African Americans. This was after World War II. And I'm going to mention, the two that he signed later on, but he signed Grambling University. He signed Grambling University star Paul Tank Younger. And Grambling, as we all know, is a historically black college. And the hall itself has their own hall within the hall. It's where the Black College Football Hall of Fame just happens to be. And Younger was the first ever player to come from a black college. But he was not just someone who, he was just signed because he was from a historically black college. No. It is way more than just that. He was a great player. He was a legitimately great player. He's on the Hall of Very Good.
Sorry, I always have to laugh there just for people who are listening for the first time. The Hall of Very Good is just one of Vinny's loves and pet peeves at the same time.
It's a love in terms of I'm very happy that Ken Crippen has acknowledged them in the Pro Football Research Association. However, I never like it when people say very good, because whenever someone says very good, it never means, they were very good. It always comes across as a very derogatory term. Like, not you. Whenever I hear very good, I never hear you were very good. I always hear you weren't good enough. That's what always comes to my mind. That's what it comes to for me. But, Younger was truly a great player. And this was a time where you played both offense and defense and special teams. You had the whole 9 yards. He was a great fullback. He was in the bull elephant backfield with Dick Horner and another one of my most wanted guys, Dan Towler. That Rams offense in the early 50s was one of the best in the history of the league. And no, the league was not created in 1966, guys. It was created in 1920 You understand that the league did not start with the Super Bowl. It started with back in 1920. But he was fantastic. He was an All-Pro like 3 times. And the Rams, with that phenomenal offense, went to 3 consecutive championship games, and they won one of them. They also made the playoffs the following year and also made another one in 1955. He was also a linebacker, too. And he doesn't just start with his playing. He doesn't just stop with his playing career, because when he retired, he was hired by the San Diego Chargers, now Los Angeles, as an assistant GM, making him the very first African-American executive. First one ever.
Yeah, which is something that I don't think gets a lot of play. A lot of people didn't know that.
No, it's very important. It's why I'm big with youngers, because it's not just his time as a player. The fact he was the first ever African-American executive. First ever one.
Well, I think this might be a good time to sort of segue into something else. I'm going to ask you to name 3 other people after, but you brought up a couple things that sort of have made me think. Now, we've seen that about a week ago, I believe, in the NFL, they're trying to incentivize teams to hire more African Americans in coaching. The Rooney Rule that they've tried hasn't yielded the results that I think they would hope for. Obviously, it hasn't. And I've always sort of been of the belief that if you've got, and I'm going to use my wife as an example. My wife is an Asian female in the hospitality industry, and she is in upper management. There's not a lot of people in upper management that look like her.
Yeah.
And it's sort of the same thing when you look at pro football, and really a lot of sports, but pro football especially. I think the NBA is sort of bad for that too, but sometimes I'm a little clouded as a Raptors fan because our GM is Masai Ujiri. But
he's great.
Oh, isn't he?
He's so good.
My God.
He's great. He is.
They don't need to put a statue of Kawhi. They should put a statue of Masai.
Masai is just a great GM, period.
Right. But I mean, whatever sort of in your core group of workers should be how it looks at the top, in my opinion, of almost anything.
Yeah.
And hospitality, obviously, and pro football are 2 completely different animals. But when it comes to this, it's something that has to be. And I can't see why, here we are in 2020, why the National Football League almost feels like it needs to incentivize people or teams to hire black men to be higher up in the food chain in coaching. It doesn't, scouting, management, it doesn't make sense to me. And so for you to mention Younger, who was a pioneer in that, I think it makes it even bigger for your Hall of Fame case. So I just wanted to sort of jump in there with that.
That's the guy that it's weird that I'd be passionate for a guy that's like that, but if you know who I am, then it really is.
No, it's not, for you, it's not weird at all.
No, it fits the same bill. It legitimately does fit the same bill. So, now as for other names that are notable, along with Fritz Pollard, who was also the first ever black coach, along with him came Rube Marshall, which his impact wasn't as big as Pollard, but I'd say that when you both come in at the same time, their names are just back and forth. Some have argued that Marshall should come afterwards, and I agree. I'd be down with Marshall, though I don't know if I'd have Robert Marshall or Bobby Marshall. I've heard many different nicknames for him. I don't know if he should come afterwards, but it's gotten bigger. I'm not as passionate about him as the other 2, but I'd be down for it. I don't see there being any issue, at least in my opinion. I mean, some may disagree, but then there's the other 2. I was mentioned about Eddie Codel before. The first 2 players he signed was Kenny Washington and Woody Strode. Yes, that Woody Strode, the actor Woody Strode. He's gotten some buzz recently too. those two, especially Washington. Kenny Washington was the first ever African-American signed after World War II. Very first. He's considered by many as the Jackie Robinson as the NFL post-World War II. That's a pretty big deal. When you're considered the Jackie Robinson of the NFL, yeah.
That's about as high as it gets.
What?
That's about as high as it gets. When you're the Jackie Robinson of anything.
I mean, with Strode, I can understand why people are not as big as him because, he only played really just one season. But Kenny Washington, when you're the first ever one and you are a big name for it, I'm big on Washington. He'd be after Younger for me.
Really? Okay.
It's impact.
Okay.
Yes, it comes to impact. When it comes to, impactful players that were African-American, he is after Younger, and Younger's after Wallace, because it goes for Wallace, first one ever, Younger, whole 9 yards, baseball whole career, and then Washington because, you're the Jackie Robinson of the sport.
So following that, give me two more other players that you would really feel passionate for, and then I want to bounce a baseball player off you.
Well, these two were the first two players that were drafted by a team. George Taliaferro, who was a quarterback. He played for the Colts, but he was drafted by the Bears. But he elected to sign with the Dons, the AAFC. But he had a good career. He was an All-Pro. He was a 3-time Pro Bowler. When he died, some people were pissed that he never got a chance to get serious consideration for the Hall of Fame. And then the other player, Wally Triplett, was the first ever African-American draft pick to play in the NFL. He's had a few returning records, actually, for the Lions. And he has no joke, he has a framed picture of himself in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And it's the same thing when it comes to, Sunday's going to be the one between Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa. They have stuff for them. They have a big section dedicated to them, but yet he's not in the actual hall that people care about. And I just think it's wrong. I think people will get pissed over it, as they should. But even for those two, not before the main three I've mentioned. But I want to see George Taliaferro, especially because, with black quarterbacks, especially, and the ones that I've mentioned myself, like Cunningham, McNabb, and even Vic, the demand for black quarterback, especially for the Hall, has increased, especially with social media and because of the protests. So yeah, I'm down with this one.
And actually, I think it's sort of a segue. I didn't tell you that I was going to mention him before we went on air. You're talking about sort of like black quarterbacks, and before, nowadays, if people, God, I feel so old when I say this, people your age, but you're 20 years old and I'm 40, God knows what, how much, a lot, 47. So, but as a 20-year-old man, and I don't mean to say this in a condescending way, in your brief time here, watching football in a modern sort of sense, you've seen black quarterbacks all your life.
Yes.
For myself, I remember what a big deal it was, and the media made when Doug Williams won the Super Bowl as a Redskin. And although
I was going to mention him, actually, but I'm not too sure about Doug Williams because that's really
and I don't think Doug Williams is a Hall of Famer, but this ties into somebody who passed away a couple days ago. Ken Reilly.
Yes, Bengals fans were pissed, really pissed.
That he's not in the Hall of Fame or that he's not even considered. Ken Reilly, career Bengal, 65 interceptions, but when he played college at Florida A&M, he was a quarterback. And it goes back to that whole systemic racism that has existed in sports forever. That was sort of typical. He was drafted in 1969. in the 6th round, I believe, at Florida A&M, and then it was considered so typical. Like, we got this great athlete. No, you're not a quarterback. You're a cornerback, and he turned out to be an amazing cornerback, obviously, but that was sort of typical. I mean, it's only in the last 10, 15 years where black quarterbacks would excel at college, and NFL scouts would say, "Oh yeah, play him at quarterback."
What's even worse is that Reilly, despite being 3 times old, I'm not trying to do it to like a Bengals, but Reilly does fit the bill because he is from a historically black college. He is in the Black College Football Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. Reilly fits this bill as well, and Bengals fans are really the only team I can say that I legitimately agree. There is legitimate anger to be had, unlike some other teams like the Raiders and whatnot.
Yeah, regarding the Hall of Fame, just to be specific, where you're going with that. But yeah, we agree. Yeah, we've even talked about that before. So, like, Reilly is part of that, I guess that sort of group where, and I'd like to hope that it sort of ended with Antoine Randall, if you remember him. They converted him to wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like it's just one of those weird realities that there was a belief that a black man couldn't be a quarterback. Now, thankfully, we've gotten past that, but this only happened recently.
Mm-hmm.
I was joking. I was joking with my friend back in Canada, my Jamaican Canadian friend. So like nowadays, you want your quarterback black, and your running back white.
Yeah,
with Christian McCaffrey.
It's the funny thing. You had Lamar Jackson, Christian McCaffrey. Like, what the hell is this? You see, black quarterback and a white running back. What?
Yeah, and 20 years ago, only 20 years ago, if you were to say like the best running back in the NFL is a white guy and the best quarterback is a black guy, people would laugh you off. They'd laugh you out.
It's still perplexing to me too.
Yeah, it's so strange. So is there another player you want to mention? Because I want you to get your take on a baseball player, like in regards to all of this.
Yeah, which one?
Oh, okay. So you're done with that. He will be eligible in the Veterans Committee, and that's Curt Flood.
Yes.
So we're talking about sort of like influential African Americans. Curt Flood, with his challenging of the reserve clause, is what created free agency in baseball, and it transcended not just baseball but all of the major sports. And Evan Nolan and I, when we do our regular show, we joked about having a Curt Flood award for the ball player who signed the best contract based on his limited skills. But Curt Flood, great player in the 60s, was essentially blackballed after he refused to trade to the Phillies.
The Phillies were a very racist organization, and I saw Ken Burns baseball, and it showed him explaining why, and I'm like saying, yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm. I agree. You should have the right to choose where you should play, and I know I've seen Chris Russo, Mad Dog, who was against the inclusion of what's his name? Name escapes me right now. Marvin.
Marvin
Miller.
Yeah. Okay.
He was against the inclusion of Marvin Miller for some insane reason, because it's not what I think the Hall should be about. Okay, Chris.
Oh, I loved Marvin Miller being in the Baseball Hall of Fame. I would love Curt Flood even more.
I love it too. Okay, Chris, because you know so much. Okay, why don't you ask every single player, or at least just any random 100, doesn't matter what it is. I guarantee you, like 99% of them are going to say, "Oh, hell yeah, Marvin Miller." He was the one that repped our union. He was
Absolutely.
the one that Marvin Miller is the one. He's the reason why we have the player contract. This guy is so important to everything. In fact, I've seen Mount Rushmores of influential baseball figures, and it comes down to Babe Ruth, Jackie Robinson, Marvin Miller, and Curt Flood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like Flood for me, and like I think you probably saw this too. There was like a motion from a couple members of Congress.
Yes, I actually have a whole paper that I have in my room that I have in my hand right now that actually has everything. Like the fact that Congress is asking for it, and the fact that every single player union, MLB, NHL, NBA, NFL, doesn't matter what it is, they're all calling for Curt Flood because of his impact. Now, will the voters actually listen to it?
It should be mentioned too.
Yes.
That group of congressmen, they're all white too, if I remember correctly.
Yes, they are. And if I also recall, the era that Flood was in, that's actually up for this year. And with everything going on,
that's why I wanted to mention him.
Shocked.
Yeah, because he will be up for that Veterans year. So, like, for me personally, I feel like the way you feel about Tank Younger and William Wallace is the way I feel about Curt Flood.
I feel the same about Curt Flood too. For baseball, I feel that way for Curt Flood. For football, it's Wallace and Younger.
Yeah. All right. So, is there anyone else that you want to give a quick mention to before we wrap up?
Yes, there are a few executives, Bill Nunn and Lloyd A.C. Wells. Nunn, who has been a topic of conversation recently and was a finalist in 2020, and as well as Lloyd C.A. Wells, who was the first ever African American scout for the Kansas City Chiefs during the 60s, where they were incredible. He drafted a lot of those players. They are both in the Black College Football Hall of Fame. I do think Nunn will happen. I think the inclusion of Nunn will accelerate because of this, though I do think Wells, his demand is going to increase as well. But keep in mind, when it comes to minorities, it's important to let everyone know, it's not just black people. It's also Latinos and Asians as well. And I know that these two are wanted because of their influence and how much of a beacon they're seen for these communities. Tom Flores and Roman Gabriel. Now, we have heard a lot about Tom Flores.
Absolutely.
Most of us have heard about Tom Flores ad nauseum from Raiders fans, but also the fact that people saw him and Don Coryell as the two favorites to make it in the coaching section because of influence on the passing game, and Flores because of his influence on the Latinos, and also the fact that he won 2 Super Bowls as the head coach. I've seen some Raiders fans mention, we should include the fact that he won a Super Bowl as a backup quarterback. But come on, dude.
Yeah, no,
that's not why.
I agree.
That's not why he's in Canton. He's not in Canton because of the 2 Super Bowls he won as Joe Montana's backup. That's not going to get you in. Let's be real here, guys. But as for Tom Flores, it's the guy that people want. Raiders fans, he's easily their most wanted guy, and they say he's the biggest snub in history. He's not, but
he's up there. But yeah, not the biggest.
Not the biggest, like the biggest one ever in history. No, it's not. You're just being a Raiders fan. But Flores should be in. It's not just the 2 rings. I know they're mentioning 2 rings. It's not that. It's because of his influence on the Latino community. And I think Flores will make it. Will make it soon. I think in the next year or 2, Flores and hopefully Coryell too will both make it. I'm very confident that will happen. And then you'll go on to Cliff Branch or whatever. But Roman Gabriel, here's the other one here. Roman Gabriel, I've spoken to Vinny Sheeran, who has led like I said before, Roman Gabriel push is the best fan movement by far. Nothing.
Yeah, you've said that many times.
Because of how, what?
No, I was saying you've said that many times to me on air and off air.
Yeah, they literally are the best one because it's like a one dedicated to it, and he goes into nauseum if every single little particular detail, how much he meant to the Asians, how much he meant to the team, how much his teammates, how he was often, him and Johnny Unitas were often like back and forth for who would be the MVP several times. The fact he was very similar in terms of building his play style to Ben Roethlisberger. The fact that he broke the fact that he got beat up, but he still was able to break the record for consecutive starts. And when you're considered the Babe Ruth of anything, that's impressive. But when you're considered the Babe Ruth of Asian Americans, the greatest Asian American professional athletes, the greatest one ever, the Babe Ruth, that's a pretty massive deal.
Yeah, and you can take away like his ethnicity. He was one hell of a quarterback, and like just stats alone, he's there. To me, I was looking at him against sort of like Y.A. Tittle, who had that career renaissance right late in his career that put Tittle over the top.
Yes.
And Gabriel sort of had that with the Eagles. I thought, like there's a bit of a parallel.
Now, granted, when it comes to quarterbacks, even though I do have Anderson and Isbell higher, Gabriel is not far behind. He's a really lock-in third, and those are easily my top three. Then afterwards, for senior quarterbacks, afterwards, then you get into like Jack Kemp and John Hadel. But as for modern era,
it's one hell of a triumvirate, though, there, bud.
Yeah, that's not. But Gabriel, I'm happy he's getting the push that he has because he deserves it. I know that there's those people that are going to say, "Oh, he never won a playoff game as a quarterback." Yeah, I know you're going to say that. However, Flores, his winning percentage isn't that great, which tells you one thing: the reason why Flores is getting so much buzz is one, Raiders fans, but two, the real reason because of how influential he was to Latinos. And Gabriel was that same way. He was a consistent MVP candidate. And when he was injured a bit, when he had that renaissance year with the Eagles, he had one of the best turnaround seasons in NFL history.
Right.
In fact, his passing yards led the league in passing when the average was like 1,000 or two lower. And then eventually he was past his prime, and then Jaworski stepped in, but. Yeah.
But he still had that year. Yeah. I mean, and it was that good. It was that good.
The guy.
It was an incredible year.
Here's another trivia. He was traded for Harold Jackson.
Oh, was it? I didn't even realize that.
Harold Jackson just peeks in like he always does under the radar of everyone. It's what Harold Jackson does. And that's easily, no quote, no question, he's the biggest all-decade snub all time. When you lead, and again, he's also historically black at college university. When you lead the league for an entire decade in yards, touchdowns, and receptions, and you don't make the all-decade team, there's a big problem there. But going back to Gabriel, I'm happy he's getting the push. There is legitimate buzz there. He is seen very high, and once Flores, then I can definitely see the Asian community really rising up for Gabriel. But as for this final person, I've seen it back and forth with Raiders fans, but I'm not really 100% sure. People have mentioned Amy Trask, actually. You should talk about Amy Trask,
like a very important figure in football.
Very important. She's a very influential figure. She was the very first female executive. She also was named the CEO of the team of the Raiders. And during her leadership, the Raiders were on that run in the early 2000s when they went to the Super Bowl and got clobbered by the Buccaneers. Now, granted, you could also say afterwards the Raiders became who they've been ever since then, which has been not good. But to have the very first female, this stands out so much. This stands out so incredibly much.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally get that, and it's not necessarily, it's not about your gender. It's about like what your ability is. But sometimes when you're looking at a Hall of Fame, if you're a trailblazer, that does matter, and it always matters. I think because it tells other people that you can do that too.
She is a very influential. I did paper on Trask too, not just Wallace. I did one on Trask.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I did on both of them.
Yeah. So, Vinny, I'm so happy that we decided to do this. I'll admit, I was uncomfortable. Two white guys sort of like talking about minorities who should be in the Hall of Fame, but I think we did a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to be part of our U.S. Hall of Fame stuff for the Athletic Hall of Fame, the one we're going to create. I'm putting you on the spot. You're committing, right?
Huh?
I'm putting you on the spot to commit you.
It sounds awesome. And
love it.
As for everyone else, thank you so much for listening. And for baseball, it's getting Curt Flood this year, guys. The U.S. Congress demands. Now, granted, I know people don't have a high opinion of Congress, but when that and everyone else...
I can't imagine why.
Yeah, and hey, the people from Congress that pushed for Curt Flood, they were all white too, so I don't think there's an issue with us talking about all these legitimate big names like a Fowler or a Flores or younger Strode, everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be great for the family of Curt Flood, and I really, really, really hope that happens for the class of 2021. But that's just me personally. Vinny, we'll talk soon, and thanks so much.
Anytime, Kirk. Anytime.
All right. Take care, brother. Thank you so much for listening. Stay tuned for new content regularly at notinhalloffame.com. Stay safe, everyone.